'Twas the night before Christmas, when all throughout Gotham, not a villain was stirring, not even in Arkham. The bat signal was lit in the sky with care, in hopes that the Batman soon would be there.
Welcome, Gothamites, to this very special episode of the Arkham Sessions. We are recording this on Christmas Eve, you and I. By you and I mean I am Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist of the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City and beyond, Dr. Drea Letamendi. Merry Christmas, Drea.
Merry Christmas, Brian.
We are hoping to get this up on Christmas Day. So you and I are recording right now on Christmas Eve. We're going to talk about The Dark Knight, as promised in our last episode. Again, this was selected by our patrons over at Patreon. They decided they wanted to go back to the Nolan trilogy before jumping into Steven Universe's first season. We're very excited because I'm surprised that we never talked about the Nolan trilogy up to this point. This gives us a great, I'll just say, excuse to rewatch this wonderful trilogy.
This is probably, one might argue against this, but I'd say this is, of the three, probably one of the, the best film in the trilogy, in the Nolan trilogy, if you will.
I think you would find very few arguments with that assessment, even going so far as to say it was the most awarded of the trilogy at the Academy Awards. Of course, our villain in this episode, played by Heath Ledger, posthumously won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, an award that I thought was highly deserving. It was a very unique approach on the Joker. Of course, we'll talk about that approach.
I had forgotten just how good this movie is. And I've always liked it, but watching it, especially, at the end of 2020, there was this, the themes about society and all of the reasons why we need to work together really coming across so profoundly. And I think in relationship to what the Batman is supposed to symbolize, I thought this was there are some things we need to talk about, certainly, but I thought that the overall message of this movie is valuable. And yet the ending, it seems to me a very tight script, that this tells a full story. Yeah. Even though I learned that Heath Ledger died, I guess, in post-production, and there might have been some plans for both him and Two-Face to make appearances later. So some of this had to be really tightened up toward the end of the movie, and yet it is still such a powerfully told story, and probably one of the better Batman films out there, available to us to really tell us about Batman's story.
For sure. Christopher Nolan always said that he didn't really have much of an idea for a third movie prior to signing on to it. Of course, that's also a way to creatively and financially secure a good deal, as he wasn't signed on for a third, so he didn't say that he had an idea for a third. But his collaborator in the story, David Goyer, actually revealed in an interview much later that the initial idea had been for the second movie to be about the capture of the Joker and the third movie to be about the creation of Two-Face. So during the trial, you were going to have Two-Face created similar to the way he had been in the original, the comics. I guess the Long Halloween was when we saw the quote unquote origin of Harvey Dent there in the courtroom. But we were going to get something very similar to that in this original Nolan trilogy. Now, Nolan apparently wanted to then condense that into a single movie to make it tight and strong, which is why we see the origin of Harvey the way we do. So we don't know what would have carried over into a third film. Nolan specifically said that one of the reasons he wanted it to be so tight is even Ledger wasn't signed on for a third movie. I guess a second movie for him.
Right.
But he wasn't signed on for the third movie in the franchise up to that point. So he didn't know if he would even get him back. Therefore, he wanted to make sure everything was as tight as possible in this sequel to Batman Begins. But of course, Batman does not kill the Joker in this movie. Spoiler alert. Unlike the way that Tim Burton did in '89 with Jack Nicholson, where they just killed him off at the end of that first movie, Nolan and Goyer said that they thought that that was a huge mistake. And so clearly, I think we would have seen more of Ledger's Joker in the third film. How big a role he would have had, I don't know. I don't know that anyone besides Nolan and Goyer and Nolan's co-writer of this film, Jonathan Nolan, his brother, perhaps they are the only three who know just how big a role Ledger would have played in the third film. But I think you're absolutely right. I think that the decision by Nolan was correct. I think that the script is tight. I think that it tells a wonderfully tragic tale of Harvey Dent. And I think that it was a wonderful decision to have that be a plan, and I say that with a question mark because we're going to talk about that, by the Joker. I think it's a wonderful take on this character. Mm-hmm.
And I know we'll jump into some things. I do want to say there are likely dozens, if not hundreds, of breakdowns in YouTube, podcasts, various versions of perspectives taken on this film, and we'll do our best to stay within the focus of what this show is about, which is to better understand how a movie like this can tell us more about human psychology, right? Human behavior, human cognition, and human emotions. What does this movie tell us about humanity that helps us maybe learn a little bit more about ourselves?
Yeah. Before we get into the show, which we're excited to tackle, but you pointed me toward a tweet after our last episode where we talked about Batman Begins. I want to go back to that tweet because we did tell them that we would address it in this episode. It's by Armando Chavez. He says, Arkham Sessions, after listening to your latest episode, I'm intrigued and fascinated to hear your comparison of Tony Stark and Bruce Wayne, maybe the MCU and Nolan's films. You pointed me to this because you knew that it would, I think you knew that it would remind me of a conversation that we had once had with our very dear friend, Len Wein, rest his soul. Len and I and you sat down once and we were just chatting. And I imagine that he had this conversation with many people over the years, but I found it so insightful that it has stuck with me since we originally had it. When someone says that they want to compare someone between the MCU and the DC universe, and they start talking about either Batman or Tony Stark, Batman or Iron Man, they immediately go to the other as being the counterpart. And Len said that that is 100% inaccurate. And I sort of was a bit taken back by that assessment because, of course, you've got two multimillionaires who do not have special powers, who each lost their family at a pretty young age and have taken their fortunes and created a suit with the knowledge and the technology they have to become quote unquote superheroes in order to save, in one case, basically a single city, and in the other case, New York and any other part of the world that might be overtaken by dastardly villains or aliens, or whatnot. Len understood those parallels, but he also told us that that was simply aesthetic. That's all surface level stuff. Yeah, he's got money. Yeah, he's got no superpowers. Yeah, he developed a suit.
But you're speaking of Batman.
Either one of them.
Oh, got it.
That's the thing yes, these are parallels, but they're all on the surface. When you really burrow down to the core of these two characters, you're talking about what makes them who they are. And that is their strengths, and that is their weaknesses, their flaws. Of course, Tony has a number of weaknesses. He has a number of flaws, thanks to Denny O'Neil, really, who made him a bit of an alcoholic. He has demons. He's got these sort of hurdles that keep him from being the best he can possibly be. And in some cases, in some writers' minds, maybe those demons have actually helped him be the Iron Man that he is and the best Iron Man that he could be. But of course, we know Bruce Wayne is not an alcoholic. Bruce Wayne is as in control of his faculties, of his vices as he can possibly be. In fact, one might argue his only vice is simply being Batman.
Well, his addiction is adrenaline, which we've talked about many times on the show.
And young warts, possibly. He just loves collecting young warts. But Len said no. The true comparison to Bruce Wayne in the MCU is not Tony Stark. It is, wait for it, Reed Richards. Now, I know what the listener is automatically jumping to. Reed Richards doesn't count because he has superpowers. As Mr. Fantastic, he has the ability to stretch, and that automatically, prevents him from being an appropriate, adequate comparison to Bruce Wayne. But when you really burrow down to the core of these characters, once again, they are both multimillionaires who use their money to create contingency plans. Reed Richards, just like Bruce Wayne, has literally used every minute of his waking life, morning, noon, night, and even the minutes where he is sleeping. Notice I say minutes and probably not hours. I doubt that either one of these men sleep for hours. They are using those minutes to just dream up any likely and even unlikely scenario that might take place. And they both create contingency plans for them. In the case of Reed Richards, he might wake up and create a quantum phasey flux machine just in case a being from an alternate dimension of A plus B equals 13 times X Z happens to split the time-space continuum and come over into Earth. Reed Richards has a machine already developed for that.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying so Iron Man it's not as if Iron Man isn't a counterpart to Batman, but that Iron Man doesn't, someone like Reed Richards goes beyond the suit. Like, especially in this film, Batman is beyond, he transcends the mechanics and the strength, the power of what his suit brings.
Yeah.
And there are additional ways in which he kind of strategizes and manipulates his environment in order to secure safety, in order to sort of, achieve his goals. I'm hearing you saying that Reed Richards is a similar character because it's not about the gimmick. Iron Man, I wouldn't say is about a gimmick, but is fully dependent on all of the aspects of his suit.
Yeah. Batman's more well-rounded. He is a detective, but also he is a guy who, even if he couldn't build the quantum phasey flux machine that Reed Richards did, he still 15 years ago came up with the same scenario and has a contingency plan for it tucked away somewhere in the back computer. I mean, we've seen this sort of actually, it was based on a comic arc, but then later became the Doom movie where where those contingency plans backfired and they were used against him. It turns out that Batman has a contingency plan for every single member of the Justice League just in case they become uncontrollable. Just in case they become dangerous to the world. Batman knows how. He has deviously, I say deviously because, it seems, it does seem to some degree nefarious, but on the other hand, he's not doing it for a bad purpose.
I think it's untrusting. I think he cannot trust anybody but himself. So he has this extra level of security.
Is that a bad thing, though? Is it a bad thing for you to say, I am now dealing with, and in the case of the Justice League, you're talking about mostly metahuman/aliens that are significantly stronger, faster, more powerful than Batman can ever be by himself. So he needs to be 20 steps ahead of any one of those characters just in case something goes wrong. Some red kryptonite is introduced and Batman goes haywire, or just in case Green Lantern decides to use his will power to create a giant fist and punch Earth. Batman needs to have those contingency plans, and I think you're right. It's absolutely a trust thing, but that's sort of what brought the two characters. And ever since Len told me that, I read the comics and I watch the movies and I look at the different ways in which they are treated. Tony Stark reacts to things in the same way that Reed and Bruce will develop those plans, will develop those machines or whatever to take care of whatever problem. Tony rarely does it proactively. He does it reactively. He sees the problem, he assesses it, he creates the machine that can defeat it. Batman's already thought of it, Reed's already thought of it, and they've both used their money and their knowledge to make this happen.
And look, we're going to get letters. This doesn't mean that Tony Stark is not a brilliant man.
For sure.
The three of them, I will say, I believe Reed Richards is multiple standard deviations above the other two men's IQ. Let's just be very clear.
100%.
So we're sort of talking about the top 0.01% anyway. Yeah. So to say that one is more intelligent or more strategic than the other is really sort of comparing geniuses. The other thing I want to say, it's interesting that you brought this up because a writer and friend of the show, Rob Bricken, actually asked me about these contingencies that Batman creates and linked it to the male ego.
Oh, so really?
I will link folks. It's in Mel Magazine. I'll link folks to his write-up on this. It's a really kind of interesting take on what Rob calls the traditional male power fantasy and why this particular psychological aspect of Batman is interesting to male readers. Of course, as a female reader, I challenged some of the ideas that he brought to me, but we had a lovely conversation, and folks can read a part of my response in his article. I'll make sure to link that. We've got to move through because I want to talk about this as much of the Dark Knight as I can. Yeah. Given that this is the first time we're talking about it, given that this film was groundbreaking. I mean, at so many points, I made you pause the film and I had questions for you. These, the cinematic aspects, the real stunts, the real explosions, much of this is not CGI. So just, again, we're not a podcast about filmmaking, but we should be. But just on the aspect of how entertaining this 2.5 hour movie is, and just how good they got Bruce Wayne. They really nailed it. They really nailed the psychology of Batman and Bruce Wayne here. And I just really applaud that. And I hope I can do it justice by talking about the psychology of the Dark Knight. Now, you had a couple of things you wanted to announce about our Patreon, and then maybe we'll jump into it.
Well, let's save the Patreon stuff for the end so that we can just jump right into Batman, because I think you're absolutely right. I think it's time to talk about this character, to talk about the fact that Chris Nolan really prefers most of his most of what you see on screen to be shot in camera. So let's talk about his incarnation of Bruce Wayne in his sequel, of the Joker, of Harvey Dent. And of course, I want to bring up a couple of additional characters that we didn't speak about too much last episode. And that is Lucius Fox, also created by our dear friend Len Wein, and Gary Oldman's take on Commissioner Gordon. We're not going to go through the entire movie scene for scene, but I will say...
We have to talk about the opening bank robbery.
I will say...
Right?
This opening bank robbery, brilliant from a cinematic point of view and, of course, from a character point of view. It actually helps us discuss the Joker a little bit and how the Joker works in this particular film, because there is a dichotomy there between what he says is his mission and what it actually...
right.
The way that he carries it out. If those of you who are watching it on the Blu-ray notice, this entire opening sequence fills up your TV because this whole thing was shot in IMAX. And so it is a bigger frame, lot more visually there, and you get to see the entire thing done in IMAX. After the bank robbery, when the school buses are driving away, right after that, it then cuts back to a 2:35 image. So you get the black matted bars at the top and bottom. And you'll notice as the film goes on that it switches depending on how dynamic Chris Nolan wanted these scenes to be.
And it's interesting because the naked eye doesn't notice. Someone like me, I'm less intuitive and I'm not looking for these particular tricks. I don't notice.
Yeah.
I'm really in the story. The bank robbery is so brilliant, and yet I remember watching it for the first time when I first saw this film. You don't really the surprises and the just the mystery of it is really well done. Now, when you watch it again and you know who is the Joker, you start to then see the that just the level of menace, the level of hostility, and also the level of planfulness, which he then denies that he's into later. So I think that's what you were talking about, just in terms of his the Joker's psychology, where he presents himself in a certain way, but his behavior sort of lends us to believe that he's not exactly the most accurate storyteller. He's not reliable.
Yeah, similar to the Killing
him.
Joke. Yeah,
exactly. And so I don't know if that's necessarily intended. I know some of it's intended, but he's almost a poor assessor of himself, which makes me really interested in the whole in the psychology of him, for sure, because his conviction is that his perspective of society is correct.
Yeah.
And yet he's not exactly accurate in his own evaluation of himself and what it is he's doing. What's great about the beginning of this film is that it starts with the robbery, which is a series of what would you call it? Like betrayals, backstabbing, just kind of a master plan that the Joker designed so that he can essentially escape with all of the mob's money from this bank.
Yes, this was not a plan by several guys who all knew each other well. They were all brought together by a faceless figure that they did not know. They only knew that he was a man called the Joker. Only one of them appears to know that it's because he wears face paint. And they have each been brought in uniquely for different jobs. During those jobs, what I found interesting is they each share with one another that they have been told to kill each other after those jobs have been done. You know, like, this isn't something you necessarily have to do. The only one who really doesn't do it is there's two guys up on the roof. One of them is sort of hacking into the alarm system and making sure that no one dials out. And if they do, it's not going to 911 or whatever. And once that job is taken care of, the man behind him simply shoots him. Another man in the vault explains to the man who helped him break into the vault that he was told to shoot him once his job was done, and he does. Then it becomes a series of betrayals where each person progresses to the point that they have finished the job they were supposed to do, until eventually it comes down to only two of them, and the one man knows or assumes that the second man had been told to shoot him, and the second man simply says, "No, my job is to kill the bus driver." And he's like, what bus driver? And then suddenly the bus runs into the bank, killing the first man.
Amazing.
And if you notice,
has to get out, Joker has to get out of the way.
Not only is he doesn't get out of the way. What he does is, if you notice, they're doing a little dance where the guy's I'm sure you were told to kill me. And the Joker is just sliding to one side, moving, pivoting him into position to be killed by the bus.
Smart.
So it's brilliantly done. And then we find out that he's the Joker. The last man alive is the Joker.
Well, I have to say, that part is such a great part of this bigger scene. So it tells me, though, that the Joker is not a technician. He's not breaking into the vault. He's not finagling with the alarm system. He's like, his skills, if you would say this is a group of criminals, he essentially designed the plan and then kind of stepped back and let it unfold. And then toward the end, I mean, what he's doing is he has the most homicidal role here. Mm-hmm. He is picking up the gun and killing people. I mean, there are others are doing this too, but that's sort of what his role is in this.
Well, okay, so let's talk about this, because I want to dive right into Heath Ledger's take on the Joker. This is a new version of the Joker that we've never really seen before. And I do appreciate that everyone who decides to take on this character desperately tries to make it something that we haven't seen before. But I want to discuss the fact that he worships anarchy. There's even a scene later on where he explains to a bedridden, horribly scarred Harvey Dent.
At that point, it's Two-Face.
Now Two-Face.
Yeah.
That he doesn't have a plan. I've got the audio. Let's play it here.
Hi. You know, I don't want there to be any hard feelings between us, Harvey. When you and Rachel were being abducted, I was sitting in Gordon's cage. No, I didn't rig those charges.
Your man, your plan.
Do I really look like a guy with a plan? You know what I am? I'm a dog chasing cars. I wouldn't know what to do with one if I caught it. You know, I just do things. The mob has plans. The cops have plans. Gordon's got plans. You know, they're schemers. Schemers trying to control their little worlds. I'm not a schemer. I try to show the schemers how pathetic their attempts to control things really are. So, when I say, come here. When I say that you and your girlfriend was nothing personal, you know that I'm telling the truth.
Here, you would be led to believe that this is a man who simply believes in sort of dropping a bomb into a room and seeing what happens. Just anything that happens, that's where the world takes us. That's where chaos takes us. But throughout the movie, he has set up such elaborate schemes, even down to the point that at one point, he is trying to kill Harvey Dent in a truck. This is when we find out that the Bat Pod exists inside of the Batmobile. the Bat-Pod comes out, and clearly you're meant to think that the Joker did not anticipate being caught by Gordon and Batman and, the GCPD. However, we then move to the MCU, not to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We moved to Gotham City jail, basically, and he is being he is carefully being watched. He is then given an opportunity to make a phone call. That phone call sets off a bomb in another prisoner's body, which then helps him get out. He wanted to be caught. So even that was part of an elaborate plan. Gordon even says later he wanted to be caught. He wanted to be taken to MCU. Mm-hmm. So you realize he's not totally anarchistic. I mean, he might be ideally, he might want to believe that inside of everyone is this sort of monster that can be created. We're going to talk about that in a second. But ultimately, he is still a mastermind of the most elaborate schemes.
Look, this Joker is the most dynamic. I think we can probably say, at least for a live action Joker, such a full-bodied, such a complex, well performed Joker. Mm-hmm. This is, I don't even know that that's Heath Ledger. At no point am I thinking this is Heath Ledger.
Yeah.
The part about, so in order for this film to work, all these other people under the Joker's purview, all the thugs that work for him have to step by step follow these particular expectations, right? Down to when the Joker is caught and basically incarcerated or held. He's held at the police station. Mm-hmm. All of these things need to happen. The man who has a phone sewn into his chest, mm-hmm. that phone has to cause him enough distress to the level that the guards let him out, and the phone, everything has to happen at such a precise time. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that I think it would be somewhat, I don't know, unnecessary to really pinpoint or try to criticize or scrutinize those elements of the film, because it's not so much about that. But I do agree with you that each of these sort of points in the Joker's plan is very well designed, clearly strategized, thought out ahead of time. So this Joker has executive functioning. He can plan ahead. He has foresight. He has a level of intellect. He has a level of cognitive functioning that he can strategize and essentially plan ahead so that these things happen in a certain way to then create the chaos. So when he tells Harvey Dent, when he gives his speech to Harvey Dent, this is one of the most, I would say, one of the most important parts of this film. Harvey Dent had just experienced an incredible trauma. He lost the love of his life. The idea that he is this potential savior, this political figure that can save Gotham, that's destroyed. His face is destroyed. And they didn't go into it as much as they do in other versions of Two-Face, but that's also an incredible, like, sort of the destruction of his personhood, of his face. Mm-hmm. The disfigurement is sort of a memory or a reminder that he's been broken. And
it's more personal in this take than it was in The Long Halloween, where he's attacked in a courtroom. And of course, we are led to believe that that's going to happen in this movie too, where he's attacked in a courtroom, but he has it well underhand. So this disfigurement is directly related to the loss of Rachel. Yeah.
So all of this is sort of, he's in the bed, nearly, within days of his recovery, and the Joker is such an amazing scene. Because first of all, Harvey does not react until the Joker takes off his mask, which is kind of silly. But you have to watch this again if you haven't seen this in a while. The Joker as this hospital nurse is the most horrifying and yet comical experience. It's such a good performance. But what he tells Harvey Dent in that moment is so important. He tells him that chaos is fair, which is such an important core idea, especially after people have experienced trauma, especially ones the types of trauma that Harvey Dent has experienced. It's very direct. It's very personal. And meanwhile, the Joker is telling him, this is why you must embrace chaos. You were targeted. This was personal. You have been attacked. And yet you should embrace the nature of chaos because it's fair, because everyone is equal, because it makes you no better than me no better than you, and it makes us the same.
Well, and when he's sitting there telling him in the bed, he actually says it wasn't personal on his part, that it's almost like the universe itself has conspired against you. Therefore, because he says, you have to understand, I'm not the one who set the charges. I'm not the one who kidnapped your girlfriend. I was sitting in the jail cell. It takes
away the accountability.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting that you say that, because a good trauma therapist will try to harness the randomness of some traumatic experiences so that we're less destroyed by it.
Yeah.
We have to know that some of the traumatic experiences we have are due to the randomness in our universe. Not every aspect, but some of those aspects. And those are the elements we have to embrace. So the Joker is, in this moment, harnessing the power of the chaotic theory when it comes to trauma.
Yeah.
And in this moment, he's so believable. He has conviction. And I think he's caught Harvey Dent at the best time. This is the turning point, right? This, in theory, is how you make a good man bad.
Yeah. Which, by the way, is his ultimate plan. I mean, his ultimate plan, regardless of how complex every other plan he has is, it still comes down to, I need to prove to the world that none of us are good, that we are all still products of chaos, that one bad day will affect the best of us in such a way that it completely transforms us into something else. In fact, there are a couple of moments in watching this film again with you yesterday. There are a couple of moments that struck me. Now, of course, I always noticed that after the Joker's truck, semi truck is flipped over by the Batpod in the middle of the street, Joker gets out with a machine gun. And it's very reminiscent of Jack Nicholson coming off the float at the end of Batman 89. And you hear him say under his breath, hit me. Come on, hit me. I want you to. Mm-hmm. And it occurred to me, especially now, that of course the Joker wants him to. He's not suicidal by any stretch of the imagination. But what he is saying is, if you go ahead and do it, I will have proven that you are also touchable by this, that the rage will take you over. And once again, even if I don't succeed with the Harvey Dent plan, even if I don't succeed with the fairy plan or any of that,
this would be the ultimate
I will succeed.
Achievement.
Yes. You will break the one rule that you have, which is do not kill, and you'll do it right here in the street, me simply standing here, not shooting at Batman. It wouldn't be defensive. It would simply be Batman mowing him down. And of course, at the last second, Batman doesn't. He peels away. He wrecks the Batpod, and the Joker looks annoyed by it. He's like, God, I've got to keep working. I've got to keep pushing.
He's like, there's more I have to do. And I disagree with you because I think, you said he's not suicidal by any, he's suicidal by the stretch of my imagination.
Sure.
So the willingness to be in a destructive environment, the willingness to introduce chaos, the willingness to introduce danger is exciting for him.
Yeah.
And we've talked about the duality between Batman and the Joker, that if the Joker is at 11, Batman's at least an 8, right? That they're both attracted to
I don't
adrenaline.
know that I would even lower him to that degree.
They're both, look, they're in the middle of the street, basically trying to kill each other, right? There is, focusing on the Joker and not getting too carried away about Batman. Focusing on the Joker and not getting too carried away about Batman. The Joker is absolutely fascinated with destruction. He says it himself. He's interested thematically, he's interested in societal chaos and anarchy, but he's also, so there's a psychology and physiology of this as well. He introduces the experience of chaos in his environment to the degree that he's willing to be in a life-threatening situation. He is suicidal to the degree that he would be open to dying by his own doing if it means some bigger idea. And this is why it kind of goes back to, yes, he is a mastermind and he's planful and he's particularly intelligent. He's not like these other, I'm trying to think of another version of the Joker that's just sort of mindlessly, stupidly chaotic. This Joker is planfully directly introducing chaos in such a strategic way for the idea of it. He has to introduce it to make his point. So it's an interesting, I think it's an interesting, more, like I said before, a more fascinating version of this character than we've had before.
Speaking of the psychology of certain scenes, and since we're talking about this truck flipping scene in the Batpod, let's talk about the psychology of Christopher Nolan and his filmmaking in this moment. I don't know if you noticed, but did you at any point feel super uncomfortable or weirded out by the sound of the Batpod, or just in that scene? Were you ever uncomfortable by a specific rising tension that goes simply beyond?
I was uncomfortable and comfortable. Strangely, I was in discomfort the entire 2.5 hours, but in a good way.
So
no, I didn't notice anything like that.
Nolan inserted a sound effect, which he has later used in the score, in Hans Zimmer's score for Dunkirk. And it is an effect that psychologically makes the listener so tense that in some cases, especially during Dunkirk, when it's used to maximize the tension of the score, people were complaining of feeling nauseated.
Can you distill, do we have this clip? Can you distill?
I have a little piece of the effect. All
right, folks, put your food down.
Yeah, let me play it here for you.
Now there's a Batman. Oh, you want to play? Come on. Come on.
So it's like a winding, a grinding, winding up. It's like a launch that's about.
It is like a launch, but if you noticed, the frequency keeps going up, and the tension never breaks. So Nolan never wanted him to shift gears on the Batpod. He simply wanted it to continue to accelerate. The problem is, mechanically, the Batpod would need to shift gears. It would need to go, and it doesn't. It just keeps going. So this effect is called the Shepard Tone, and it's a sound that was created by a scientist named Roger Shepard. And it's when you take 3 sine waves that are each an octave apart, and you place them on top of one another, and you move the bass note upward or downward and then you have them loop. It becomes this sonic loop that sort of gives the effect of the pitch constantly rising or falling, but it never actually does. So you sort of get this impression of like, my God, it's never going to stop. It just keeps going and going and going, when really it's just looping on itself, and it's giving the impression of it getting higher and higher pitched, or in some cases lower and lower pitched. And so Nolan is wanting to play with the audience as well. So once again, let's talk about the Joker's ultimate goal. It's to illustrate that even the best of us, and in this case of the movie, the White Knight, which is not Batman, it's Harvey Dent, can be corrupted to a point of pure rage to become an agent of chaos. And he does so by kidnapping the love of his life, Rachel Dawes, and then having her killed. Of course, Batman goes after Rachel, trying to save her, while Gordon and the rest of the GCPD go after Harvey Dent. Unfortunately, they were misinstructed, and Batman ends up saving Harvey, and Gordon and the team just barely miss out on saving Rachel. It destroys both Harvey and Bruce. Harvey spirals in the hospital room, nearly killing the Joker. He decides to allow the fate of the Joker to fall onto this coin, the dual head-sided coin that has now been scarred by the explosion. So now there is a heads and a tails to it. And he has now decided to not make his own luck, as he has been saying throughout the course of the movie, but truly allow fate to decide the outcome of the Joker. And in this case, the Joker wins the coin toss. The Joker loves this idea. Mm-hmm. He loves the idea of, yes, allow the coin to decide my fate, because that's the point. That's the whole thing. He's
been able to create a villain who is that, I don't know, the idea of a psychopathic maniac who's willing to just let this single coin decide whether he will murder people.
He embodies chaos. He embodies the idea that the universe has made the decision for him, that it's not personal. That Harvey is not going to kill the Joker or any other member of society based on a personal vendetta. He's going to simply do it because the coin told him to. That's exactly what the Joker is telling him. Like, look, hey, these things were set in place, but I didn't do it out of any personal reason. You shouldn't either. And now he has created a character who has taken that on with this coin. And in fact, he doesn't kill the Joker. He doesn't kill Falcone. He does end up killing Falcone's driver, which then, who knows what the universe has in store for Falcone.
He's also in the back seat while he shoots the driver.
He shoots the driver. But he buckles in. Falcone's not buckled in. So presumably, he's like, look, I'm not going to kill you because the coin told me not to, but I am going to kill the driver, and whatever happens from this point forward is simply the universe doing its thing.
And so here's, I think, where there is a little bit of mirroring of if this is the Joker's manifestation of his chaotic theory, there's also a manifestation of the flaws, because we see this is actually quite good, because it tells us that even in that moment when we, for a tiny fraction of a second, connect or believe in what the Joker's saying about chaos being fair and chaos being sort of part of this, a natural part of this universe, and what would it mean if you just kind of give into it? Wouldn't you actually, could you possibly be better off? Can you just let go of the control in order to relieve yourself of the painstaking torture you're under to make things right, especially in a place like Gotham? we then see that Harvey Dent is directing himself. He is taking authority. He's going directly to Commissioner Gordon to decide his fate as a way to show him what it's like to be Harvey Dent turned Two-Face, that something was taken from him, and now he's going to show Commissioner Gordon by potentially killing his son James.
Well, and not just Gordon, he's doing it to everyone who was involved. So Officer Ramirez, he's right. going to them, to her. And he seems to be going with a vendetta against certain people.
And a vendetta is, by definition, planful.
Yeah.
And not chaotic. So and so I'm not saying, I think what I'm trying to say is that whether intended or not, there is the reveal that the Joker is ultimately psychotic. Like, ultimately, it doesn't make sense. Theoretically, we're seduced by it, and we're curious, just like the Batman is around the Joker. We're really enthralled by the mystery, the horrific nature of this villain. And yet you start to see the logic is crumbling. That what's revealed is that this doesn't hold up.
So the Joker is essentially, and this is sort of what I got from the fairy experiment. As people are escaping Gotham, a ferry full of citizens and a couple of military personnel who are helping them get out of the city. They are told that there's a bomb on that boat, and at the same time there's a second ferry full of inmates, because really it always comes down to the inmates are going to be on one side, like just like in Batman Begins, the inmates are let off the island and let into Gotham, and the civilians, so this one has to be the same thing.
You've got to restructure this whole city. What's interesting that I didn't think about until this viewing is kind of what you said, that that all of this was planned for action to take place on those two ferries, meaning, where this started is that the Joker was threatening something nefarious in the tunnels and on the bridges. He didn't say anything about the ferries. So again, he's ostensibly an agent of chaos, but again, there's this painstaking detail. In order for people to get onto the ferries, he has to threaten these other routes of transportation. Like, right. It's so, and it works because here you have these ferries that are completely full, corner to corner.
Yeah. So there are a couple of different things that I want to talk about here, because I think it lends itself very well to your line of work, Drea. The Joker decides that he doesn't want Bruce Wayne's identity released to the public. So he says, well, I'm going to kill the man who has figured out who Bruce Wayne is. Or I'm not going to do it, but I'm going to say that if he's still alive in the next hour, then I'm going to blow up a hospital. I'm not going to tell you which one, but one of the hospitals is going to go. The city goes nuts. Now, this becomes a trolley experiment in my eyes, and in the eyes of the Gothamites. Like, could you blame a Gothamite for shooting this man because they are saving an entire hospital full of sick and dying people and doctors by killing this one man? It becomes the trolley experiment. He is no more valuable than all those other people. And so the Joker's now set up this trolley experiment, and of course Bruce Wayne stops the whole thing brilliantly. But now in the case of the ferries, both ferries have bombs, and each ferry is given the detonator to the other bomb. And within 10 minutes, they have to decide to blow up the other ferry, or basically more people will die. And it all comes down to this idea that when put up against the wall, we will all become monsters. You will kill those inmates because they are inmates and they might kill you, even though they've not threatened you. And you don't even know if they actually have the detonator. You just are being told this information. So this becomes like...
This leads us, I mean, so many discussions we've had about the studies in psychology that demonstrate that under the right conditions, people will do bad things.
This is the Zimbardo.
This is Zimbardo in the 60s
the Joker
and 70s.
Is Zimbardo in this moment where he's like, look, I am convinced
that these people...
We
cannot say that the Joker is Zimbardo.
No.
Because Zimbardo never intended to harm anybody. But
but he is the embodiment of Zimbardo's conclusion at the end of that study was when put in a right situation, these people will, and when I say that he's Zimbardo, what I mean is the Joker isn't the one being put to the test here. He is putting the two boats to the test. And he is saying, look, I'm telling you right now, one of those boats is going to kill the other boat. If they don't both kill each other, it's going to happen. And he seems unhappy when it doesn't happen.
And for those who are needing a quick refresher, the Stanford prison experiment is the study that we're referring to that Zimbardo ran with I would say some very I'd say we're very cautious about how we analyze and understand that study because it would be done very, very differently today. That there have been some newer observations, some criticisms of the original design. But ultimately, what we learned from that study is that human behavior is malleable, that people under certain conditions, like in a prisoner experiment, will take on certain personality type features. They will maybe be more aggressive if they're in the role of the guard, or they may be more submissive and passive if they're in the role of a prisoner. What's cool about this what we can probably call an experiment, because the Joker is experimenting with Gothamites, like he's experimenting with the citizens of this city, that he ultimately wants to prove a point. And my guess is whether the ferry with the convicted criminals or the ferry with the innocents, so to speak, I don't know that it matters to him which ferry is blown up.
No, of course not.
Right? I think it's more about, I actually think his impression is, doesn't matter if you're a convicted criminal or a rando.
You're still going to do it.
You're a bad person. Like we're all fundamentally, crucially mad. Like we all have this madness, and all it takes, as he said, is a little bit of gravity, or he says madness is like gravity. It just takes a little push in a certain direction. And some psychologists believed this, of course, back in the 60s and 70s. And then we better understood the complexity of human behavior and understood that that's not necessarily how we're designed, that there are multiple variable factors that influence our behavior. And what I like about the outcome, this is such a wonderfully presented dilemma, right? Like we're so in this moment. It's like a few minutes where we're in both ferries. We're like right up against these individuals as they're trying to make this decision, and the tension is so thick. And we are also in the moral dilemma. I think Nolan does a really nice job of putting us in that experience. Like, so what are you going to do? What would you do? What do you Batman really isn't, I guess we get the impression Batman isn't going to swoop in and save these people. And what a profound message at the end. And the social commentary is, you don't really need Batman for this. That fundamentally they'll save each other.
Yeah. Yeah. The idea is that the criminals already have a criminal history, so it's implied that of course we think they're willing to kill the other side, and the other side is willing to kill the criminals because they are innocent. The side of the civilians is innocent, and the criminals have had their chance. So it's almost you're sold on this idea that the civilians are going to be worse than the criminal boat. Because they think of themselves as in a higher tier of society.
So this Batman is a more developed Batman than in Batman Begins. In Batman Begins, he's sort of wrestling with his legend, like he's supposed to be an idea. And here, I think there's a lot focused on Bruce Wayne starting to notice his fallibility. That it's not so much about being a symbol at this point. It's about understanding or wrestling with the question whether Gotham is savable. And all these people are telling him, in particular, that it's not like that he's sort of built up something that is going to crumble. That Alfred is challenging him, saying, you know, as a human being, you have limits. Like, you have to understand that you can't push yourself or you'll die. Like, literally, this isn't sustainable. Rachel is telling him, I'm not going to be in your life if this is what you're pursuing. And then, of course, the Joker is challenging him, saying, you're on the brink. Like, I will push you and push you until you become homicidal, which then proves my ultimate point. And so there's this sort of element here where he's trying to grapple with who he is.
But again, then you've got the most idealistic of the people at the end. There's an opportunity where Bruce Wayne has the ability to turn himself in, and Harvey Dent doesn't allow him to. He actually takes the blame. He says that he's Batman simply because he believes it's more important for Batman to be in the city doing his thing and being the ideal and being that symbol. He now believes that it's a more powerful thing to be out there than to be in a prison cell. And so he takes the brunt of that. And in fact, Alfred even takes the opportunity to do the exact same thing. He tries to talk Bruce out of...
Oh, that was weird because... Wasn't that weird?
Not for me.
So explain that, because my understanding was, so we're in this yet another moral dilemma.
Yeah.
Batman is essentially given the message from the Joker that unless you remove your mask and reveal yourself, I'm going to kill multiple members of your protective team. Your folks at Gotham PD, folks at
judges, mayors,
and
Gordon.
Commissioner Loeb gets poisoned and dies. So Alfred is like, nah, just wait a bit.
Well, I've got the audio. Let's play it here because this is very important.
People are dying, Alfred. What would you have me do?
Endure, Master Wayne. Take it. They'll hate you for it, but that's the point of Batman. He can be the outcast. He can make the choice that no one else can make. The right choice.
Today I found out what Batman can't do. He can't endure this. Today you get to say I told you so.
Today, I don't want to. But I did bloody tell you.
So essentially what he's saying is you've now entered this arena and you have to be okay with the repercussions. And again, this becomes trolley experiment stuff. This becomes the city itself is more important than the lives of Loeb or Gordon or the mayor. You cannot let one person threaten any of these people or all of these people and have it take you off the track that you are on to save the majority of the people, the more people. You cannot say that you did this to save a city and then decide as you are about to hit that junction that you can't save the city.
And to what end? Like, at what point, he could the Joker could continue to terrorize in the same manner. And I'm reminded, I guess I just felt a little weird about Alfred telling him to essentially hold back and allow folks to.
Well, but he wasn't really... Okay, so he is telling him to let it play out, but what he's really doing is... And this is why I think I love Michael Caine so much. Other iterations of Alfred have certainly played the wise conscience of Bruce Wayne, but this is a man who is genuinely saying, like, look, I support you as a human being, but now I have to support the ideal that is Batman. I have to support the symbol that it has become, or at least the symbol that you told me you were going to become as Batman. And if we're going to do this, you need to do this. And surrendering yourself to the police is not going to solve the Joker problem. And I think we all know that. Bruce refuses to listen and is literally about to step forward and sacrifice himself when again, Gotham's White Knight, Harvey Dent, steps forward and says he's the Batman. And why? Because the same principle is in Harvey that is in Alfred, which is that this is bigger than any one person. This is bigger than any group of people who are protecting Batman or whatever. This is about Gotham City. And this is about not letting this, I'm not going to say, I don't want to say crazy person.
But a terrorist, and
not letting the terrororist win.
Yes, and so I'm so glad that you're pointing this out, because my mega analysis or meta analysis of the Joker is that he embodies what society is most threatened by in that time. So in Burton's era, the Joker was
purple. He embodied purple.
Grimace. He was a manifestation of greed, but also a manifestation of whatever would sort of attack and subvert capitalism. Like, there was a weird twist on his kind of like, he was a hyperbole of capitalism and all the dangers of those aspects.
And turning your back on it, because once he realized that it was about business and about a woman, he then became like, I don't care about this money. I'll give this money away because I know that you're greedy. You being greedy will come after the money, and I can kill you all. And he kills his boss Grissom, and he kills all the other mob bosses because all they want is money. And
so sort of the defacing of the museum, the subversion of the whole capitalistic society. And in the 80s and 90s, we were holding on to that was sort of the control in the society.
It's the greed is good idea of the 80s.
So I felt like the Joker was both a criticism of that, but also what's scary, what people were scared of. In the mid 2000s, what scared people was terrorism. And this wasn't going to be a Batman movie about terrorists from the Middle East. That wasn't, that's really not what the Batman universe works with.
Yeah.
So what they did, and what I think they sort of converted, was the Joker's most menacing aspects: chaos, terrorism, destruction, the blowing up of buildings. Like, this is a clear symbolism, if not overt consideration of our fears of terrorists and individuals or groups of people that might threaten destruction if a certain thing doesn't happen. And so I think you're right about the way that it was faced, the way that it was combated was through like, no, we're not going to play. Like, that's not what we're going to do. Yeah. And then quickly, because this is not about the 2019 film Joker, but the 2019 film was, sort of centering on elements of our fear around the loner who has mental health problems, who is potentially someone who's going to shoot up a public place. Again, a simplification of that, but that is what people were scared of. So it's, is the next Joker going to be one that introduces a virus that, is invisible, and then that could kill millions of people? I don't know, Jared Leto, maybe.
Well, and one thing I want to come back to is, and I think it's told in this story, I've got some audio, let's play it.
A long time ago, I was in Burma. My friends and I were working for the local government. They were trying to buy the loyalty of tribal leaders by bribing them with precious stones. But their caravans were being raided in a forest north of Rangoon by a bandit. So we went looking for the stones. But in 6 months, we never met anyone who traded with him. One day, I saw a child playing with a ruby the size of a tangerine. The bandit had been throwing them away.
So why steal them?
Well, because he thought it was good sport, because some men aren't looking for anything logical, like money. They can't be bought, bullied, reasoned, or negotiated with. Some men just want to watch the world burn.
This story is incredibly important because later...
That bandit in the forest in Burma. Did you catch him?
Yes,
How?
we burned the forest down.
They are saying that sometimes in order for things to get better, things have to get worse. And sometimes you have to do the worst thing. They burned down the forest to get to this jewel thief. And so one could say, well, okay, did the ends justify the means? And you have to come to grips with that yourself. You have to realize that sometimes it's going to get a lot worse before you can make it better. And I appreciated that side of Alfred. I appreciated that he also alluded to a life before the Waynes and that it took place in Burma. And, it's a war zone already. So it gives you a little idea as to who Alfred may have been prior to being the Wayne's butler. I love this Alfred so much.
Well, Michael Caine's a good Alfred because he's bringing in what I would say are really good therapeutic approaches. Like instead of always maybe a relentless sort of blaming or like, why are you doing this questioning? He's simply, he's asking questions. He's saying like, what if Bruce Wayne were to say like, but what are my limits? Alfred would simply say like, what do you think your limits are? Like, well, he doesn't necessarily directly instruct him or reprimand him. He has various approaches to allow Bruce to explore, and he lets him, and Alfred too doesn't necessarily interrupt or intervene. He sort of lets things play out in order for Bruce to learn his own lessons, which I think is really important. Either a very good parent or a very good therapist, but all the more reason to appreciate that this Alfred is a genuinely valuable part of the story.
Yeah.
Where he's mirroring and telling Bruce Wayne, more about himself as a person.
Can we talk a little bit about some of the supporting cast members, particularly around Bruce, and their cast members, their characters that I didn't want to talk about in the first movie because I felt like they would get fleshed out a little bit more here. And I think we need to talk about Lucius Fox, because Lucius Fox is not just Q in this movie. He's not just the guy who's going to build the gadgets or take the gadgets away from Wayne Enterprises and hide them, bury them in some R&D and then hand them over to Bruce Wayne. He is to some degree additional morality for Bruce. Bruce is taking it upon himself to create this technology that is phenomenally invasive. When we talk about 2020 now, we learn what our cell phones can do. I mean, you brought up the fact that just the other day, you mentioned something and then suddenly you were getting ads on Facebook for that thing. Cell phones and telecom companies, have figured out this way to listen to our everyday lives. And Batman takes that technology and creates essentially a sonar weapon of sorts. He's got the ability to map out all of Gotham using every cell phone in Gotham. And this is based on technology that Lucius Fox created. And once Lucius realizes this, he then tenders his resignation. He's like, I will help you do this one thing, to take down this one terrorist. But after tonight, I'm done. And I can't be a part of this.
And again, perhaps a reflection of where we were at in the mid 2000s, late 2000s. To what lengths will we go to capture terrorists?
Yeah.
So how much can we spy on one another? How much can the government
Totally.
Or authority figures spy on us and learn about our every move in order to secure the safety of the community?
Totally.
Now, there's a balance to that, but I think there, I certainly believe there was. This is a comment. This is a reflection of the limits. And Lucius Fox, I think, is again in the vein of moral decision making, says that's where his limit is. He's not going to use his own technology to violate the privacy of the community members. And I think that's an interesting, and it's a way to give us more of the personality of Lucius Fox. He's not just doing what Batman tells him to do.
Yeah.
And in fact, Batman couldn't do anything without the intelligence and the technical savvy of this individual.
Yeah, and you get the sense that certainly at the end of the movie, when the tool has been used for its purpose, Bruce tells Lucius, when you're done, type in your name. And Lucius does. He types in Lucius Fox, and at that moment, everything destructs. And he realizes, all along, even though I thought I was doing something that could potentially be corruptive later, Bruce always knew that this was a one-time thing. And you realize that morality has been so well honed inside of Bruce by those who matter the most to him, by people like Lucius Fox, by people like Alfred Pennyworth, and people like Rachel Dawes. These people have instilled in Bruce and Thomas Wayne and probably Martha Wayne, even though we don't really get to see what her contributions to Bruce's personality. These people have all made Bruce who he is, not just the prisons around the world where he then learns how to fight, and the Ra's al Ghuls of the world and those people. These people back home in Gotham are the ones who have made him the honorable man that he is. And I think it was important to talk about Lucius in that way. I think it's also important to talk about the portrayal of Gordon, who at this point is not commissioner. He becomes commissioner later on in this film. But here's a man who is willing to make the ultimate sacrifices, to pretend to be dead. I
didn't like this.
Well, and let's talk about that.
And I didn't get it. So when it's revealed that he's alive, one of the very first questions we ask ourselves is, who knew? And I did pause. No, you can't watch a movie with me because I will pause every time I have a question.
Yeah.
And my question was, who the hell knew? And it seems like so few.
Nobody knew.
So his wife didn't know because she was quite angry.
Yeah, the
as
wife and
anyone
kid didn't know.
would be.
Yeah.
Essentially
they had to sell it. They had to sell it.
Essentially thought her husband had died.
Yeah, the grieving wife is going to help sell that. Yeah.
That is, I find that I cannot even describe. I get that this is truly following the concept of the ends justify the means, but we have traumatized this woman. Even if you were to tell me, but she learns that he's alive. Yeah. I don't know what the time period was. Maybe not even like a day or two, but that is harsh. That's like a level. It makes me dislike. I don't know how necessary that was to traumatize this woman. Anyway, I
think the mayor probably knew. The mayor knew because okay. Harvey. I mean, I'm sorry. Well, we know that Harvey didn't know. We know that. But I think the mayor probably knew because the mayor was prepared to make him commissioner, whatever. Like the mayor was the target and Gordon got in the way of the bullet. So Gordon.
But did the inmate, did the Arkham, that young kid who they said had schizophrenia, was he in on it?
No.
Okay,
No,
because he's the one who attacked the mayor.
Right. Well, that's because the target was the mayor.
Okay, and so Commissioner Gordon jumped in front of the mayor, intercepted
The bullet.
got shot,
Yes.
and didn't die.
Correct.
But could have died.
Could have died. Yes.
So he really put himself on the line there.
Truly, yes.
So he expected this to happen, expected someone to shoot,
Yeah.
and then expected to survive, and then he pretended to be dead.
Look, this plot's been done many times. You know,
Okay.
Lethal Weapon. In Lethal Weapon, they shoot Riggs, and he goes through a lingerie shop window, and then they can use that to their advantage because he's the one hiding out in the desert with a sniper rifle, picking off bad guys. Like, because they all thought he was dead. You know, like this sort of thing. If you take out Gordon, you now believe that one of Batman's most ardent allies is gone, and that Batman will continue to fly down this path of self-destruction and mental destruction, you know, and eventually
Right.
will fall into chaos. So all of this is happening, and so with that knowledge, Gordon took the responsibility of pretending to be dead, ultimately dressing up like a beat cop. You know, like a SWAT cop or whatever, and was the person transporting, I believe was the one driving the truck, was like transporting
Harvey Dent.
Harvey Dent. No, he wasn't. He wasn't though, was he? He wasn't because
No. He opens the truck later.
Yeah, he opens the truck later, but he's in that group.
Yeah.
He's within that gang of cops. So he opens the truck. He's the one who captures the Joker in the street, but he is playing dead, and no one knows, because when he opens the truck, Harvey says, Gordon, as if shocked, and says, "You really do play things close to the chest." So
And Batman
Harvey
didn't know either.
I think Batman probably knew. Batman had to have known.
Okay.
Batman knows all this stuff. They were coordinating it together. I think Batman knew. Harvey didn't know, because at this point nobody knows who they can trust. And Gordon and Batman both believe they can trust Harvey, but Batman did not know that Harvey was going to take the quote unquote bullet for Bruce Wayne by saying that he was Batman. He didn't realize that was going to happen.
Scarecrow makes a really nice but brief cameo in the beginning of the film, and probably provides one of my most favorite quotes. It's interesting because the film opens with a bunch of Batman copycats, and they're not quite as
They're schlubby guys wearing hockey pads.
Yeah, and so of course, and you know, I'm glad that you bring up all of these literal supporting characters for Bruce Wayne, because the Scarecrow accurately assesses Batman and gets it clinically right by saying he does need help.
Don't let me find you out here again.
We're trying to help you.
I don't need help.
Not my diagnosis.
Bruce even says that this was not what he intended to do when he said he wanted to inspire the people of Gotham City. And you have to ask the question then, what did you intend? What did you want? Did you want the people of Gotham City to rise up against crime? Or did you want them to simply trust you to take care of it themselves? If you wanted to inspire the city, what were the ends? What was the end goal for you? And this brings about an interesting twist for Batman. He didn't anticipate them becoming copycats.
Right.
And
the end of the film sort of wraps this, because it supplies us with a better solution, right? Like, you don't have to dress up in hockey pads to be better, to make this society better. Just be compassionate, be kind. Don't judge people by their histories and pasts. Don't be Two-Face. And don't be the Joker. I think that it nicely gives us a more achievable solution.
It's interesting too, because now as I think about it, the people, so the downfall of Harvey in this particular story was really his ambition, his drive to clean Gotham up, his drive to clean up the GCPD, his mission, similar to Batman's mission, had not yet been met, and he was willing to do anything he could to make that happen. And it got to a point where it bit him. Whereas the people on the boat, the civilian boat, the man who picks up the detonator and takes on the burden of destroying the other ferry, just ultimately can't do it. And he is ashamed that he couldn't do it. He sits down and he puts his head sort of, down in a position in which he acknowledges that he was a coward. And everyone sort of looks at him too, because they were hoping he would do what they couldn't. And so the people on that boat are ultimately better at being people than either Harvey or the Joker, or because they weren't driven to be good people. They simply were good people,
Well, I don't know if this is what you mean, but making hard decisions and being in those moments of problem solving and ending up with an intentional and being intentional with your behavior, like that alone, I'm not saying that's heroic, but those are the ingredients of being a good member of the society. It's not so much that you believe in a thing. It's not so much that you're directly in the spotlight of leading a community. It's the everyday decision making that you're involved in. It's these kind of small daily things. I mean, my guess is, and even the things, and this kind of relates to what you said about Batman being hated. You even have to make decisions that aren't exactly the best ones for you, that don't exactly lead you to being perfect.
Yeah.
And that's hard. I think that those are the sort of the ugly sides, to go back to that Two-Face analogy, right? Like, we're not fully 100% perfect. We have ugly sides to ourselves, but that's how we have to embrace that in order for us to achieve the most harmonious community and the safest community.
Yes, the person who's going to unite the community. The best person, I'm gonna lay it all right here.
Oh wow, who is it?
The best character in this entire movie,
opposite, not Rachel,
is the criminal played by Tiny Lister.
Okay.
On the boat. Because he's given an opportunity, everyone on the boats, they're so terrified, and you can see in the eyes that every single one of them wants to pull the trigger to the detonator, but none of them can, and they're all so terrified, and they just want someone to take the burden off their own shoulders. And Tiny Lister walks up to the guard and says,
"Give it to me. You can tell him I took it by force. Give it to me, and I'll do what you should have did 10 minutes ago."
And the guy's eyes fall to this point of relief, guilty relief, that someone else will do what he wants to do, but is terrified of doing. And Tiny Lister takes it from him and then just chucks it out the window. So he walked up to him knowing that I'm going to destroy our chances at taking the lives of those other people. So it's not a matter of I'm going to pick up the detonator and decide not to do it. It's I'm going to stand up knowing that I'm not going to do it. I am going to walk over, physically threaten the man, or tell him that the burden is no longer on his shoulders. And then I'm going to take the device, chuck it out the window, and go back and sit down and allow us to die if that's what the other boat decides, but I'm also going to make sure we don't kill that other boat.
Because it's selfless.
Yeah.
It's more humane.
Yeah.
It's more compassionate,
Yeah.
which is essentially where we're trying to end up.
Yeah.
Now, watching this film in 2020, what was this like for you? Because you're talking about so many elements that are on our minds.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
And unfortunately, we watched it just like a week and a half after Tiny Lister died, so then suddenly I see him and I'm like, oh, and so, yeah, for sure. Well, but Drea, remember when this movie came out? I mean, this movie premiered and there was a shooting in Colorado. I mean,
Oh, right.
so this movie has a mired history already. You have not only the death of Heath Ledger, but then you've got a guy who walked into a movie theater in Aurora, Colorado, and shot people in the movie theater who went to see this movie. And so you've got some people who this movie is just the worst of things. And then you've got the themes of this movie and what it means. And so, I mean, I love the film. I'll watch it anytime I can, but I don't know that I necessarily had thoughts in 2020 that I don't know that I looked at it so intentionally that way. But what about you? What were your thoughts as you watched this film now versus any other time you've seen it?
Well, certainly I was impressed because many of its themes and many of its messages are profoundly real now. They were real then for different reasons, right? Aspects of terrorism, aspects of fear, aspects of having a more compassionate society. And now we're sort of grappling with the not the fear and uncertainty alone, but also the anger and frustration that others can't, follow instructions about the health and safety of the community in the same way that I don't know that many are doing in order to curb this virus. So if it isn't obvious, I'm pointing to the variety of ways in which people are responding to the pandemic. And we're right, we live in Los Angeles, which is now being called the epicenter of COVID-19. 1 in 80 people in Los Angeles have COVID right now. Mm-hmm. And today, yet again, we broke a record with the highest number of hospitalizations and deaths in one day related to COVID. So it really, I think for me, addresses and maybe even helps relieve some of those feelings of frustration and the anger that we might be holding on to. And when I say relieves, I mean a reminder of why it's important for working together, why it's important for what the elements that you were talking about, Brian, that we're looking out for one another, we're taking care of one another, we're supporting one. It's not like there's one person who's responsible. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what this movie is telling me. Is like, yeah, one person can't really fix this. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We needed all those people on the ferry to tell the Joker, like, no, that ain't right. Yeah. Like, no, we're not. This isn't going to be us.
Yeah. I just remember. I don't think a movie since this has ever had such a cool viral marketing campaign like this. I remember being at Comic-Con and being told. I remember an airplane flew with a trailing message behind it that was sort of. It may have even been whysoserious.com. Like it sort of led you to whysoserious.com. And then you got this, I remember, and I still have it to this day, tucked away in one of my copies of Hush. There were people handing out $1 bills with mm-hmm. the Joker's, like that had been, really, it was another image taped onto the $1 bill, but it's basically the Joker's image with the smile and the dark eyes. Because remember, at that point, we had really only seen that image of the Joker. We had sort of seen this dark image, but we hadn't really seen a whole lot more. And then I remember there was a whole like you could go. You were told if you solved the puzzle, you were told to meet out in the courtyard there at the gas lamp, and then you got your face painted. You could get your face painted with the Joker face paint. And all this stuff was just all secretive, follow us and have these things. You could choose sides. Were you on team Harvey Dent or were you on team Joker? And you could sort of make, and I remember later there was sort of this viral campaign where you could take pictures of different things around the world. Like there were different cities where things had been hidden, and you could, the internet, this was back when the internet was good, when the internet was cool. They would then rush out to these locations, take photos, come back to the website and be like, I found this, I found it, and it would unlock eventually like different codes. I remember at one point there was a telephone number that you could call in. And I remember it was like, oh, if you chose to be on Team Joker or whatever, you call this phone number and you call it. And on the other line, it was a recorded message from Commissioner Gordon.
This is Jim Gordon, Major Crime, Gotham Police Department. Not the voice you were expecting, huh? We have your name. We have your number. We have your computer's IP address. So what I'm saying is, we have you. Consider yourself the Gotham Police Department's newest recruit. You see, this works one of two ways. Either you're going to jail for conspiracy in a criminal enterprise, or you'll work for me. We'll be in touch. Oh, have a great day.
We had it so good.
And not since Blair Witch had there been a viral campaign that had been so effective as and Comic-Con has never had anything this cool since then either. This was really the heyday, I think, of any of these campaigns.
Really cool.
It was cool. I love it.
Of course, we could go on and on, reminisce about this film. I don't want to overlook one of the things I want to make sure I say is that this film would be, 2/3 of this film's brilliance has to be the Joker. It just is for me. I said this before, but the character embodies what, maybe Brian, you would call this like the writer's Bible or kind of the character elements that we need in order for us to recognize this as the Joker. I would say these are the personality features we need for the Joker to be recognized as the Joker. Being aggressive, homicidal, certainly anarchistic. But also what stands out for me about this Joker is that storytelling piece. He's talking to his victims. He's talking about his scars. He tells various stories about the origin of his scars. None of them are real. Like probably they're all probably made up. But again, and I know folks have talked about this, that he is just like in The Killing Joke. He is making us suspicious of his credibility, and so as we follow him, we're deepening our suspicion. We're deepening his mystery, and we're becoming more and more detached from him. Yeah. We do not, we understand him, and yet we do not understand him, and it's brilliant. Yeah. So, I could go on and on, but Heath Ledger's performance in his, not just his clear disorganization with the Joker sort of being sometimes affectively bizarre, giddy, laughing, hostile, sort of a variety of different emotions. So effectively disorganized, a fantastic portrayal. And something that I don't think we get to talk about a lot is his profound loneliness. Now in this movie, he's recruiting so many different thugs. Like he actually needs other people, but his mentality, his sort of philosophy, he seems to be very alone and where he's at. And he reaches out to Batman to essentially join him in his world, and everybody rejects that. So it's kind of, or Batman in particular rejects that quite directly. So one of my favorite portrayals of the Joker, and sad that
we won't get more of it.
Sad that this is all we get.
Yeah. Drea, let's take this opportunity to thank the patrons that have made this episode and many more possible. John Henry, Christopher Bauer, Carl Ward, my dad, Alex Hilk, Christopher Bauer, Michael Pruitt, Leslie Brownlee, Ian Stanton, John Henry, of course, Eric Rev Sully O'Sullivan, Vertigree, Maria Diego, our good friend, Chris Tamara, Lindsay, Dr. Jerome Anderson, Ariel Neona, Samir Bhakta, and our dear friend Todd Stashwick. Speaking of Todd Stashwick, if you are familiar with the TV series 12 Monkeys, or if you're familiar with Buffy or Supernatural or The Middleman, if you've ever seen the live action movie for Kim Possible, you know our friend Todd Stashwick. He is not only a patron, but on Cyber Monday, he launched his own website, Todd Stashwick's Nerd Circus. He has sort of cultivated this aura, this throwback feeling of going back to the 70s and the 80s, your parents' basement, and he has created T-shirts that make you feel like you're back in the basement playing D&D or just old board games that you loved. He has created cultivated a store that has so many awesome products. Things like T-shirts that honor characters that he has played. So, he's got the hashtag No Garlic T-shirt that honors the Dracula character he played in Supernatural. Deacon, he played Deacon on 12 Monkeys, and he's got a wonderful T-shirt that honors that. But in addition, he's also just got T-shirts that honor that feeling of going back and just loving things. You can also buy things like dice for D&D or other role-playing games. You've got things like geeky tumbler tiki glasses that have a sort of a parade, a cartoonish parade of not only Todd, but all the things he's ever loved following behind him. And one of those things might look a whole lot like Batman from Batman the Animated Series. And, those are amazing glasses. The glass actually says, was it Welcome to the Nerd Circus? And then it also says, may you always roll with advantage. He's also got some amazing dice towers / boxes that look like cigar boxes that also look like wood paneling that I kid you not have orange shag carpet lining the inside of it. It's just wonderfully done. You can go to thenerdcircus.com to see what he's got. But you and I are going to be giving away a pair of these tiki glasses to our patrons. So if you're interested in being a recipient of these glasses, come to patreon.com, find us. We are the Arkham Sessions. $1, just a $1 contribution will get you access to this contest. Now, I will put the contest up on Saturday, December 26th, and it'll have a photo of the glasses on Patreon, and we're going to ask you to tell us your geeky origin story. Tell us what that thing was that made you realize you're a geek, you're a nerd, you're one of us. Tell us your story. Drea and I will sit down. We will read each and every one. We will decide on our favorites. And that person will get a pair of these glasses from Todd Stashwick's Nerd Circus absolutely free. And by the way, these weren't provided to us. These were not free glasses. Drea and I paid to have these glasses sent to us. And so we are paying that back by letting you win a pair for no more than $1. We've also got some really cool things coming for Patreon in the coming year. certainly something that is going to involve our good friend Livio Remendelli, who created the Kill Lock comic book, which we have recently talked about on several occasions. We're also going to make our challenge coins from 2020 available to you, each and every one of you.
We got it. We got to make 2020.
Much easier.
I mean, 2020, like the coins look amazing.
Yeah.
But
it's like you survived 2020.
Yeah.
Like you get one of these coins. We'll let you know how you can get one of these limited edition coins, and then the 2021 coins are being designed now. So sometime next year we will have those. Stay tuned. Come find us, patreon.com/Arkham Sessions. Drea, until next time, why don't you tell the folks where they can find you online?
They can find me online on Twitter and Instagram at Arkham Asylum Doc, and my website, drdreapsychology.com.
You can find me online. I am at bward028 on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram at b_ward028. You can also come follow us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter at Arkham Sessions and on Instagram at The Arkham Sessions. And we want to give a shout out to our dear expanded family over at Fanbase Press. Barbara and Bryant Dillon, the wonderful creators and founders of Fanbase Press, just had twins, lovely twins, and we want to congratulate them. All of you should go do the same by following at Fanbase Press. Go check out their website, their news, their articles, their comics, and their other podcasts. Until next time, I'm Brian Ward.
And I'm Dr. Drea Letamendi.
And together, we're wishing you a very happy holiday season.
From the Arkham Sessions. Now Riddler, now Penguin, now Two-Face and Bane, on Condiment Man, on Scarecrow, on Mr. Freeze and Strange. To the top of Wayne Tower, to the top of City Hall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all.